What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another installment of Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. I am your host, Matthew Raridan, and man, do we have a lot to talk about today. There is a lot of news going on in the college football world. I mean, it's that time of year. It's getting crazy. It's getting hectic, but we didn't see this coming. So we've got a lot to talk about when it comes to that. We're going to be talking about the NFL. We're going to talk about now college basketball. It's tipped off. We're almost a week in, and it's already exciting, just as usual. And we're going to go over the MLB awards, more specifically the Gold Gloves. So that's always a fun time when it comes to baseball. You always have your favorites, but you always have those out there that every single year, you don't know how they do it, but they are just so consistent that they're able to put up that insane defense. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce my host here. First, we've got David Street, the man with the Florida Gators hat. How's it going, David?
Doing well, Matthew. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for asking. And we also have Ed Smith, our Mr. Longhorn.
Welcome, y'all.
It's good to have you both as always. And guys, let's start talking about what's going on right now in college football. And actually, I'm going to make that my Matty Ice's cold rant of the day. First things first, we're going to talk about this Lane Kiffin Ole Miss drama. And there's a lot of hate going on out there right now on both sides. But I'm going to tell you how I see things, how I feel, and this is just one man's opinion. And I think Lane Kiffin was totally in the right here. You could talk about his language, maybe the words that he said, but besides the fact of that, I think what he did is what any human being would do in the real world right now. Key word I'm going to use here is the real world. We you If I were to call into no, not even call. If I were to no call no show, let's say to my work for 2 weeks straight, do you think I'd have a job when I came back? No, I would not. That's just how things are in the real world. You have to be responsible. You are an adult now. And when you just don't show up for 2 weeks and your boss, your head coach, is contacting you to come in and you still don't, and then you hide behind this issue, it's clear that you're not cut out to be on this team. So what I think Lane Kiffin did was totally in the right, and a lot of people are out there maybe saying that it wasn't, and then you also have other people out there that say he was, and this is all about a matter of opinion here, but I think what Lane Kiffin did was necessary, and it's going to teach this guy, and as well as many other athletes on there, especially on that Ole Miss team, how to be a responsible man. Because when it comes down to it, you have to communicate. You have to let them know what's going on. You cannot just not show up and expect it to be bananas and pajamas when you come back. I mean, it's the real world we live in now. And I mean, I had a very similar story to this, especially when I was in high school. I didn't show up to practice 2 times in 1 week. What do you think happened when I came back to practice? I got benched. Okay. I was told, guess what? You're not playing this game. You could come show up, but you're not playing this game. That's what happens. And that's high school football. He's in college now. I mean, you are one more step away from the pros. If you don't have your crap together, then you're not cut out for this job. So that's just how the cookie crumbles. And I mean, at the end of the day, Lane Kiffin, what you did was right, but now it's on to the Georgia game. That's where the focus is. And unfortunately, the media is trying to take that away. This is the biggest game for Ole Miss all year. And Ole Miss is having an incredible year. But now it's time for Lane Kiffin to put up those blinders and time for him to focus on this Georgia game, because I think Ole Miss can definitely surprise the world in this game. But guys, Ed, how do you feel about this situation going on in Oxford right now?
I really think that there was language, and that's kind of what you expect from a football coach is language, because I don't know if there's any other coach that's going to be a Tony Dungy type that's just going to come in very monotone, say something, and everybody be super motivated by it. Every coach is going to have their language that they use when talking to their players, because they've had such a long relationship with them, through the recruiting process, through getting them on campus, through them playing for them on, on Saturdays, and for those that are getting on the Lane Kiffin for the language, look for the beach through the sand. There, look for the forest through the trees. Do not get so caught up in the words that are used and lose the message that he's trying to tell this kid. He used some, let's call it some blue language, and the kid was not very receptive to it because he was looking to be offended by the language, so he could turn around and use this leaked audio to use against Lane Kiffin, so he could get his way either back on the team or financially, taken care of for his own mental health issues. Guess what? We've all run into mental health issues throughout our lives. You've got a job to do. You work through it. Nobody is going to give you 2 weeks off, even if you tell them, because you didn't feel right one morning. You've got to work through it. That's part of being a person in society, a college football player, just all these different levels. And it's really just being able to work through that. That's what you learn through this process. And he's not learning anything through that. So that's just my 2 cents on it. David, what you got?
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys 100%. Let me just say that mental health is something that I take very seriously. Now, some people hearing that, they might say, oh, well, you're just saying that because you're just jumping on the bandwagon of what everybody else is saying because you want to look good, okay? Well, buddy, let me tell you that mental health actually does affect me personally. It hits close for me personally. It's something that deeply affects my family. I've seen it firsthand. Okay, it's not easy to deal with. And I do have some sympathy for this young man, and I truly hope that he gets the help that he needs because he is clearly unwell. Now, that being said, you heard me say that I have some sympathy for him, okay? And Ed, you pretty much mentioned it. When he secretly recorded his conversation with Lane Kiffin, that was a scumbag move, all right? People might hear that differently. They might say, oh, he's calling him a scumbag. No, I'm not calling him a scumbag. I don't know him personally. But what I do know is that the move he pulled off was a scumbag move. All right. And the fact that this, recording was leaked, that it was released a couple days heading into the Georgia game, like you mentioned, Maddie, like if you don't think that this was if you don't think that this was not released for monetary reasons, then you are an idiot, point blank. And I've seen people on Twitter say that, oh, Lane Kiffin is a heartless monster. Oh, give me a break, okay? I've been yelled at. Matthew, Ned, I'm sure you guys have been yelled at too, okay? And let me tell you, like, I really had it handed to me, all right? I thought that Blaine Crane from a show called Crane Company, which you got to our audience, you guys should check them out if you don't know them. But I thought he made a really good point that Lane Kiffin was soft on the guy, and the only reason why people think that Lane Kiffin was being quote unquote harsh was because he made a few choice words, which I'm sure that Lane Kiffin regrets, right? But compared to what I've had heard said to me and what I've heard elsewhere, Lane Kiffin was not hard on the guy at all. I mean, can you imagine? And I'll just conclude with this: can you imagine if this guy's coach was Coach Saban? He would have had a complete mental breakdown. So again, I hope the young man gets the help he needs, but it's just hard to have a ton of sympathy for him after the move that he's pulled off.
Yeah, and I want to agree that and make it clear that of course mental health is a very serious issue. It is plaguing a lot of men, especially nowadays. So that is something that I do not want to take lightly when it comes to that. But you could tell there was clear motive in the whole situation from the beginning. You don't go into a meeting secretly recording someone unless you had some type of motive, like you were expecting that reaction. Obviously, if you started using your brain and you realize, all right, I haven't been here for 2 weeks and I play for a Division I Power 5 conference school, he's going to be mad or there's something going to be going on. So I'm going to record this and then use it again as motive and leverage the week of this game. And as if you haven't heard, he is planning to sue, and he's planning to get a very hefty settlement. That's what he's asking for. Will he get it? No. But there's motive all around. So when it comes to that, I do feel like it was like that you said, David, a scumbag move. But I want to move on to a different topic, because actually what we've been talking about with Lane Kiffin is actually old news now in the college football world. That's the ex-girlfriend. You've moved on. You found your next 10, okay? You thought she was a 10, but no, this one right here is a 10. And if you don't know what I'm talking about Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines. That is the biggest news going on right now. And I'm actually going to let Ed take this over for us. Ed, go ahead.
I appreciate it, Matthew. So Jim Harbaugh at 3:30 this afternoon was there. It was let known by the Big Ten that he is now suspended for the final 3 games of the regular season. Those games include Penn State, Maryland, and Ohio State. Casually known as the game. That's how important this 3-game stretch is, because Penn State, that's a top 10 matchup that's happening this weekend. Ohio State is a top 4 matchup that's happening 2 weeks from now. And now the Big Ten decides to come at Jim Harbaugh with this. And let's be clear, the Big Ten Commissioner's Office got the information from the NCAA, who's after Jim Harbaugh. This is a straight witch hunt of the highest order, because Jim Harbaugh, let's be honest, he's kind of skirted rules in front of the NCAA's face for a few years now, and they're just mad. They're kind of pouting and banging the desk, so they were looking for anything to get him on. And this is, in my mind, this is kind of like the IRS going after Al Capone. This is their tax evasion way of doing it. They are using a policy known as the sportsmanship policy and applying it to this scenario. That sportsmanship policy is there for altercations, fights, arguments, things that the players do before and after the game that could affect the teams that are in the contest. This is not really applicable, but they are stretching the letter of the law to bring this whole sign stealing thing and the Connor Stallions thing all together. We've been at this since October 19th, when the first announcement of an investigation was put out there, and it is just kind of steamrolled into the Big Ten coaches being on a conference call with Tony Petitti this week and basically strong-arming him into, creating this suspension. Did I mention that there is no completion of an investigation before doing this? That is totally out of bounds. They're talking about fair play and with the stealing of signs from other schools. Is there a process in place that Michigan has done? Maybe so, maybe a little bit beyond what the letter of the law allows. But when you're taking the head coach off of the sidelines for 3 of the biggest games that the team has had the entire year, that is motivated from the Big Ten office. And for those that don't know, the Big Ten office actually received a lot of that information from the NCAA. The NCAA realizes that their policies and procedures move so slowly that they cannot get the action that they want by going through their means. It would take another 9 months before they could actually provide the Michigan AD department with a formal notification of wrongdoing that they are investigating, with which the Michigan AD department would then have 90 days to respond. That is way too much time for what they want to have happen. So they circumvented their own rules by going to the Big Ten commissioner, who's the first-year commissioner of the Big Ten, and he is in way over his head and was basically bullied into all this. Now, because there's been other things that Jim Harbaugh has been accused of, never formally served with papers on, but accused of, and kind of sticking it to the NCAA, they are trying to put him in a position where they're saying Michigan is pervasive overreach on their scouting since 2021, so multiple years, with multiple violations stacked on top of each other. That sounds a lot like SMU in 1982. It's not going to happen, but it's on the table. Death penalty is on the table. So the NCAA is just really throwing this whole big thing just out there, trying to hope something sticks. And it's really funny, the timing of this, just like with the Lane Kiffin thing, the courts are actually off for Veterans Day on a day in which Jim Harbaugh in Michigan are needing to seek a court out to get an injunction to, to move this out of the way for him to coach tomorrow's game, to Saturday's game. So that is the timing and everything. This was all pre-planned. This was all just kind of laid out there that this was going to happen. Now, the thing with Michigan as an institution, they fired back, and they fired back hard. They dropped a statement today basically stating, what are you doing? We deserve a full investigation, before you do any of this. What happened to innocent until proven guilty? Show your work. There is no reason for this to be happening right now. And, we are going to come after you. Now, there may be some things behind the scenes that Michigan is talking about that we're not going to have time to get into on this show. But overall, there's a lot of bickering, and it's going to be out of bounds, really, from the games that are happening this weekend. So it is certainly beyond the lights, and that's what we're here for. And Matthew, what reaction do you have to all that news?
Yeah, I have a couple points. First things first is now I feel like we live in a society where you're guilty until proven innocent, and you're seeing it clear cut with this Jim Harbaugh situation. You really are. And secondly, I feel like Ann Arbor is now renamed Salem, because you are seeing a witch hunt, a witch trial at its finest with this. I mean, you're seeing a college head coach in Jim Harbaugh, who this isn't even his first suspension this year. I mean, you all remember Burgergate that happened earlier in the year, and you're seeing it happen again. He is now the redheaded stepchild of college football. It is, their sights are set on him and him only. You usually always hear about Nick Saban, and you still do, but now you're hearing Jim Harbaugh's name everywhere, and some of it's not even his fault. So it's just really sad to see what they're doing. And yes, it was something that was strategically planned by them, because if you were listening to the news yesterday, it was expected to happen yesterday, these punishments handed down. And then mysteriously, it went over to today when the courts are closed. And here, now the punishment's going to be handed out because the courts are closed. They can't file an injunction, all these things. And it's like, this was strategically planned, and they are coming after Jim Harbaugh with everything they got. But at the end of the day, Michigan is going to be that team, that person who kept the receipts. They aren't the only team that's doing this. It's like saying, like, before USADA came into the UFC, everyone was doping. Everyone was using steroids. It was the thing to do. Did you see Brock Lesnar back then? Everyone was using steroids. Just the same way with baseball, MLB, every pitcher was using that sticky stuff. They were trying to get more spin rate on their curveball, everything. Everyone was doing it. But that's the thing. Michigan's kept receipts. They know what they're doing, and they're not trying to show their cards just yet. At the end of the day, I think it will prevail. I mean, I hope so for the sake of Jim Harbaugh. I'm not saying that because I'm a big Jim Harbaugh fan. I think that what has been done to him is unfair and unjust. So I hope that at the end of the day, they do come to the bottom of this, and the proper people who do need to be suspended or fined, whatever it may be, get punished. But to punish him without a full-on investigation is wrong. It is a witch hunt, and that's just how I feel about it. And I imagine, David, you probably feel around the same as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more convinced now than ever that Michigan is going to win the championship. I think the players and coaches are going to rally around this. I think now they have a clear target on their back, and I think this is going to make them stronger. And truthfully, I don't think Jim Harbaugh's suspension is going to matter that much, because I think whoever Michigan's interim coach is, he's just going to run the same system that Harbaugh runs. So it's not like anything is going to be run differently. But just lastly, let me just say that the NCAA is such a freaking joke. Okay, it is such a corrupt organization that I truly do not care what quote unquote rules get violated against them. Okay, and I hope, since obviously my Gators do not have a chance in hell at winning the national championship, let alone making the playoffs, I hope that Michigan wins it all now. All right. And we heard a buddy of ours mention this before, but I hope after the game, I hope every single Michigan player flips the bird in front of the camera, because this is, as you said, Matt, this is a witch hunt. Okay, plain and simple, this is a witch hunt.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for the sport. Just with what's happening, it is that time of year that it's crunch time for these teams, and to come after their head coach during crunch time is just, like I said, unfair. But there is still college football to be played. That doesn't stop. We still got games happening, and we got some big games this weekend. And David, I know you have a big game you want to preview, and it is in your backyard, the SEC.
Yes, indeed it is. Ole Miss, Georgia. I actually mentioned this game last episode. So for those of you who missed it, Ole Miss is 8-1, and they have a real chance at an upset here. I really believe that they do. Okay, because they have the offensive system to beat Georgia's defense with their gunslinger at quarterback in Jackson Dart. And what did I say before? That the key to beating Kirby Smart defenses, or at the very least, the key to giving them a hard time, is to air it out. And right now, Jackson Dart, and this is, by the way, this is among SEC quarterbacks. He's fifth in passing yards, he's third in yards per pass attempt, and he's tied for fourth in passing touchdowns. And overall in Division I, Ole Miss is top 15 overall in both passing yards and points scored. All right. Now let's take a look at Georgia. Okay, Georgia is still an excellent team, but they're really not the dominant team that we're so accustomed to seeing from them. But real quick, just want to go over Georgia's quarterback play. No Stetson Bennett, no problem. Carson Beck has been fitting into the offensive system. And again, much like Jackson Dart, these are stats from the SEC. So he's second in passing yards, fourth in yards per pass attempt, and he's actually tied with Jackson Dart for the fourth most passing touchdowns. So both have 16 passing touchdowns. Okay. Now we all know that Georgia's defense is the team's calling card, but they've been showing they've been showing cracks lately. They're not dominating offenses like we're used to seeing them dominate. And I think in like 5 of their last 6 games, they've allowed teams to score at least 20 points. We're not used to seeing this from a Georgia defense. Now, don't be fooled, okay? Georgia's defense is still very dangerous, and they're still very capable of making game-changing plays. I mentioned before, when Missouri was playing against Georgia and Brady Cook threw an inexplicable interception literally right into, what was his name, Nazir Stackhouse's hands. So Georgia's defense is still capable of stepping up. I just don't think that they're elite the way that they've been elite before. But also, I want to compare, the opponents that they've played, because you look at Ole Miss's schedule, and they have played a tougher schedule than Georgia has. Okay, the combined opponents for Ole Miss, and by the way, I'm not counting FCS schools for either Ole Miss or Georgia. Okay, this is only FBS opponents. So, but Ole Miss's opponents are combined 42-31, and Ole Miss has 2 ranked wins. Okay, ranked from the playoffs. And I'm talking about teams that are ranked right now. I'm not talking about if you beat them before they were ranked then. No, I'm talking about if they're ranked right now, and that's according to the playoffs. So again, Ole Miss's opponents are combined 42-31, and they have 2 ranked wins. Now you compare that to Georgia, and Georgia's opponents are a combined 34-40. All right. So Georgia's opponents overall have a losing record, and right now Georgia has only 1 ranked win. So the truth is that Georgia has not been tested that much. Now, in fairness to them, they did get a good win over Mizzou. Okay, so kudos to them for that. But Ole Miss right now is easily going to be the best team that they face all year. And let's not forget that the last time that Georgia and Ole Miss played, Ole Miss destroyed Georgia 45-14. And you don't think that's on Kirby Smart's mind? Yes, that was quite a number of years ago, but as we all know, Kirby Smart is a mastermind of motivation. But Ed, you got any thoughts on that game or anything else?
Well, the point that you were making about Georgia's defense, that was a historic defense over the past 2 years. So I think it's a little bit unfair to, compare, one season versus another. However, Georgia's still Georgia until they're not Georgia anymore. Ole Miss has got to take that next step. And, I think I've said it before. This is a Lane Kiffin team. They're going to be offensive, but they're not going to be balanced enough to get over the hump of the most elite teams out there. So I'm really looking forward to see if that trend continues or if Georgia is going to continue to be Georgia. Now, I myself am actually, lo and behold, I am looking at the game of the Fighting Harbaughs, going to Happy Valley to see Penn State. Talking about defense, the team that has the highest graded defense by Pro Football Focus right now is the Michigan Wolverines. Now, I take that with a little bit of grain of salt, considering that they have not ranked a team that is ranked higher than 28th in Pro Football Focus. So there's a little bit there. Their schedule has been pretty light up to this point. Whereas Penn State, they have played Ohio State. So that's definitely a quality game, even though they did lose that one a couple of weeks back. And as you start to dive into the numbers for it, there's really not many stats that Penn State has on defense that are better than Michigan's defense. But one of them is the turnover differential. They have got more turnovers than what Michigan has, despite the difference in their schedule. Overall, they have actually garnered 20 different turnovers, whereas Michigan has only gotten 15. Now, does that make a whole hill of beans over the course of a season? Not really. However, it does mean that is going to be a key thing to look at in this game. Another thing that I did find that Penn State's a little bit better at is that third down conversion rate given up. They're only giving up 28% of the third downs that are being played against them, whereas Michigan is right around the 30% mark. So just those minute things, are going to be crucial for Penn State to, come out on this. But when you look at the offensive side of the ball, Michigan, they've got J.J. Bet McCarthy. And for those that hadn't seen it, when the news of Jim Harbaugh came down, J.J. McCarthy's one-word answer on Twitter was bet, y'all. So I'm looking forward to seeing him come out and just, roll as he has all season. He's completed 75% of his passes so far for over 2,100 yards, a ridiculous 18-3 touchdown to interception ratio. But here's the one that gets me. He is number 238th of all quarterbacks in drop back passes in the fourth quarter. Now, keep in mind, there's only 133 teams. So that's over 100 spots below the number of teams where J.J. McCarthy is dropping back to pass in the fourth quarter compared to every other quarterback in the country. That is a tremendous stat that I saw, and it's something that tells me that he has not been playing through the fourth quarter because they've been dominating teams so much. I'm interested to see what he's going to look like when Michigan gets smacked in the mouth for the first time this entire season by the Penn State defense. Now, on the flip side, you got Drew Aller, the sophomore quarterback for Penn State. I think we've mentioned it before. You know, his yards per attempt is only 6.5 yards. That's dinking and dunking, and that's not going to get it done against Michigan, who's going to get after him, who's going to cause some problems and really lock down the rest of the offense. If you can't shake it, you can't get over that hump. You know, last week he was able to up that ratio to over 7 yards per attempt, but it's going to take a lot more than that to get over Michigan. So really the thing that I'm looking at in conclusion of what I'm expecting to see, Penn State needs 3 things to have happen. 1, the defense has to make McCarthy uncomfortable and force a couple of those turnovers and win the turnover battle by at least 2. 2, Michigan will have to be stunned when Penn State fights back, for the first time, unlike the rest of their schedule. And 3, Harbaugh's got to be off the sideline. He's got to be out of the stadium and completely distracting to the rest of the Michigan team. But those are my 2 cents. Maddie, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is going to be the first ranked opponent that Michigan is facing, or at least the first true test, and it's in Happy Valley. I mean, Happy Valley is known to be as one of the loudest atmospheres in all college football behind Michigan. I mean, the big house. So it's going to be a very tough test, I feel like, for Michigan, but I do think they are going to ace this test, even though they are going to be without their head coach and they are dealing with this off the field drama. I do think that Michigan has the keys to the victory when it comes to this game. So I expect a fight from Penn State. When you see a team that's within the top 10, top 15 in the college football playoff, you expect a fight out of them. So I do expect to see that. But at the end of the day, you're telling me to choose between J.J. McCarthy at quarterback versus Drew Aller. I am going to have to take J.J. McCarthy with what he has shown, what he is capable of doing, his completion percentage, but he's playing very smart football too. And I think that is the true identity of this Michigan Wolverine offense. So that's my 2 cents when it comes to this game, but I am looking forward to it. I'm looking to see how Michigan handles this drama that's happening off the field, because that is a true test to them. They're able to overcome that and overcome playing on the road in a loud atmosphere. This is a team that's ready for the college football playoff.
Agreed.
Yeah.
What other game were you looking at?
Well, another game that's going to be big implications in the college football playoff that's happening this weekend, and that is Utah coming in to face the Washington Huskies. And coming into this season, you hear the talks three-peat. When you usually hear three-peat, you think of that Chicago Bulls team doing it twice. But we're talking about this Utah Utes team with coming into this year hoping to get that three-peat at the Pac-12 championship. And unfortunately, the cards didn't really fall their way. They did deal with an injury actually at the end of last year, and that was with their starting quarterback, Cam Rising, and he did not come back this year. And they are still a great team. I do want to put that out there. They are 7-2, and they have a stellar defense, but they are facing the undefeated Washington Huskies, who, as of now, has the leading probably odds on the Heisman and Michael Penix Jr. So far this year, 9 teams have faced him, and not one team has beat him. He is a stud. This guy knows how to play quarterback. He was born to play quarterback, and he fits it perfect for this Washington team. And when you look at it, this game, normally you would have been, all right, this is going to be one tough game. Utah's going to be in his face all game. But I just don't see that happening this game. I really don't. This Utah team, like I said earlier, they are still stellar on defense. That has always been their identity. Is you see Utah playing, you know they're bringing their defense. They're bringing those big old Samoans. They know how to play defense, and they still are showing that this year. They rank 11th in the whole country with sacks this year. They've had sacks in every game except for one. And who was that one game? Well, I'm wearing their jersey. That was the Oregon game. And you saw what happened there. They were not able to touch Bo Nix. And Bo Nix, who is right now probably the odds-on second favorite for Heisman, he did what any Heisman quarterback would do, and he led his team to a very stellar victory, a flawless victory, in my opinion. And I see the same thing happening with Michael Penix Jr. this Saturday. You have the Heisman front runner, and if you can't touch him, he's going to torch you. And that's not just him, too. Have you seen the studs they got out there at wide receivers? I mean, they've got first-round talents on both of their starting receivers out there, and there's a reason why they're first-round talents and why they will most likely be drafted in the first round. We talk all about the quarterbacks that are most likely going to be drafted in the first round this next draft in the NFL. Well, there's about probably 5 receivers that could be drafted in the first round, and they've got about 2 of them. So Washington is a very complete team, the offense and defense, and I think there's just going to be too much to handle for this Utah team. I'd love to see a close matchup. I'm just not seeing it. This is a game to me that strikes me as I could see Utah actually being the first scorer of the game. I can see them getting a touchdown on their first or second drive. But I think that's going to be about it. I think Washington is going to make the key adjustments almost immediately. And I mean, I've got a prediction for this game. I do think the over is going to hit, but that's not because of Utah. I think it's going to be more on Washington, but I have a 37-14 victory. I do think Utah scores first, and they may get a garbage touchdown later in the game, but I think Washington's going to handle them very easily, and they're going to continue to increase their bid for the college football playoff come the next ranking. So that's how I'm feeling about this game. It is going to be a top 25 matchup, but at the end of the day, I think Washington's going to be too much to handle for this Utah team. David, I mean, you feel kind of the same when it comes to that?
Yeah, Matthew. I think one reason why Utah has a chance in this game is you look at Washington, and clearly elite offensively, especially when it comes to the passing game. But their defense, while not horrible per se, isn't that good. And they've really been letting teams score a lot of points on them. So I could see Utah being in this game because of that. But at the end of the day, and let me ask you, is this game at Utah or at Washington?
It's at Washington. I feel like, I mean, if it was at Utah, I do think that things could be a little different because home field advantage in college football does play a difference, but it does especially for those 2 teams.
There you go. So yeah, at the end of the day, I don't, no disrespect to Utah, and I think Kyle Whittingham has been doing a phenomenal job, and this is arguably his best coaching job ever at Utah, but they don't have a chance against Washington. I agree with you. I think Washington is also going to win big. In my prediction, I think Washington is going to win 44-24 because, again, like I said, Washington's defense hasn't been that good, but their offense has been incredible. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and also, it's NFL is also being played. This is just Saturday football we got going on, but we got football on Sunday too. I mean, we're spoiled as sport fans, especially on the weekends. If we're working a Monday through Friday type of job, the weekends, it's very packed when it comes to sports. And right now, especially, it is. but NFL, things are starting to get tighter, division races, all that. And actually, Ed's going to kind of talk to us about a specific division and a very close matchup here. Ed?
Yeah. I'm looking at this Cleveland and Baltimore matchup. This, on paper, reminds me of the days of old when it comes to what football was for me growing up. It just smash mouth, two people lined up, and let's just smack our helmets together until one of us submits. That's kind of the way both of these teams are built. We know. Here we go with another Harbaugh. Uh, John Harbaugh. His whole philosophy the entire time he's been in Baltimore is good defense, run game, control the clock, get some good plays from the quarterback, and move on. Let Justin Tucker, the GOAT of kickers, finish the game off and move on to the next one. But here comes Cleveland. They've got the number one rated player in the NFL so far this year in Myles Garrett. He has just been wrecking people. His pass rush rate is over 25%, and that is just taking offensive lines down left and right. He has just really created such an impact on that defensive line that it's going to be tough for Lamar Jackson to, get loose and make those plays off schedule like he's used to doing. But also, there's a surprise in Cleveland secondary, Grant Delpit. He's got the sixth best coverage grade in the NFL as a safety. He's only giving up an 83.4% coverage grade, which is one of the highest, the sixth highest in the NFL. That in turn means that the quarterbacks are not really able to get anything going against the back end as well as the front end. So that's a really tough thing to deal with. Their defense, with him out there, he's also had 22 defensive stops at the safety position. So not only is he covering, he's actually getting people to the ground. That leads all safeties in all the NFL. And that's going to be a tough thing to get offense moving for Baltimore. And on the flip side with Baltimore, they've got their cornerbacks. They rate very highly as well. They play a lot of press coverage. That's going to cause some tighter windows for Deshaun Watson to get the ball moving against that defense. Like I said, these two teams are basically mirrors of each other. It's going to take the players that play above the scheme, above the game, to really bring this game to its natural conclusion. Because when you're looking at pass defense, this is number one versus number two. But yet both teams are run-heavy teams. So it's which is going to happen, the unstoppable force or the immovable object, which is going to take place. So this is going to be a really maybe not high-flying, exciting type of game, but it's going to be a game in which it's going to create a lot of tension, and you're going to want to see it all the way down to the end between these two, which how it normally is in that division. So, in conclusion, with them being mirrors of each other, does Lamar Jackson make that play? Does Myles Garrett let him make that play? That's what I'm looking for to get out of this game. And if we're going to throw a score on it, I'm going to say we're looking somewhere in that 17 to 15 type range for a final score. But I know, Maddie, you've got your eye on another team in that division this weekend as well.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do, and that is going to be the Houston Texans playing at Cincinnati against the Bengals. And, I live here in Cincinnati. I know these Bengal fans. I know this Bengals team because I am a Steelers fan. So, of course, I know them, for the most part, inside and out. But if I were to tell you, coming into this game, CJ Stroud has almost 500 more yards passing than Joe Burrow. Would you believe me? No, I sure as heck wouldn't. But that just shows you how well CJ Stroud is playing this year. And that is not to go against Joe Burrow, Joey B. And it's not that he is on the decline either. It's just that's how well CJ Stroud is playing this year. But also, if I were to tell you that the Texans' top receiver, Nico Collins, has just about the same amount of yards as the Bengals' top receiver in Jamar Chase and the same amount of touchdowns, but with 28 less receptions, that'd probably shock you too. So you're looking at a completely different Houston Texans team. And although they are doing actually pretty amazing right now, the Bengals are one of the hottest teams in football. The Bengals have won their last 4 games and hoping to win their next 5 games with a win this Sunday. They are playing, honestly, as best of football as you can right now. I mean, if you watched them just about 2 weeks ago dismantle the 49ers, yes, I said the 49ers, you would know that this Bengals team is for real. They do have, a knack to start off slow every year. It is a kind of a curse. If you come to Cincinnati, they'll tell you it is a curse that they deal with, and they believe it is too. I mean, I know I'm going to change sports really quick, but if you didn't know, the Cincinnati Reds, they have this contract. It's not a real contract, but every year opening day is a home game for the Cincinnati Reds. There is history behind it, actually, but every year, if you ever look at the schedule, the Cincinnati Reds will always host opening day at home. It's just kind of a legend here in the city, but I think in doing so, the Bengals, they always lose their first game of the year, whether it's home or away. It's just one of those things that you got to trade for. But the Bengals, though, especially when they're playing here at the Jungle and Houston's coming in, I think Bengals are playing amazing football. I do think the Bengals are going to win. This is a very pivotal game, though, for them because you are seeing Cleveland at Baltimore as well, just as Ed covered. And right now in the division, there's a 3-team tie for second place. So you've got the Browns, the Bengals, and Steelers, with the Ravens alone at first. So it's a very pivotal matchup. Every game is, especially this time of year. I just think that the Bengals are going to be a little too much to handle for the Texans, but I don't think CJ Stroud is going to have a bad game. I just think that Joe Burrow and the Bengals are going to have a better game, and I think that they've really found their identity, but they are going to be without a couple of their key players. T. Higgins has been ruled out. So is Sam Hubbard on their defense, which is a very key component on that defensive line. But Jamar Chase is questionable with a back injury, but all signs are pointing to him playing. So I think that the Bengals do pick up the win here this Sunday. They need to continue to be in this race. But Bengals, I think here in the Jungle, they will pick up the win against the Texans. But David, speaking about a different jungle, we're going to talk about the Jaguars. The Niners had Jaguars. You got a couple things that you'd like to say when it comes to that game.
I do, but before I go into that game, I just want to add to Ed's analysis just really, really quick here. I feel like the Ravens have kind of been flying under the radar some, especially when you compare them to other teams like the Kansas City Chiefs, who are getting all the attention for obvious reasons. I don't need to mention it. But I don't think a lot of people know that the Ravens have far and away the best scoring differential in the league, plus 115. No other team is in the 90s. Like, the Ravens have been dominating their opponents.
Yeah, they really have, and I'm going to probably talk a little bit more about them here in a bit. But like Ed said, as far as being a mirror image, those two teams are a mirror image, but the Ravens are insane right now. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, no doubt. Now let's go into my game. So I got the Jacksonville Jaguars against the San Francisco 49ers. So let's talk about the Jaguars because, guys, let me tell you, the future for Jacksonville is here, and it is shining bright. The Jags are 6-2. They've got 5 straight wins. They're atop the AFC South. They are trending up. All right. They're led by quarterback Trevor Lawrence, who has been very, very, very good. He hasn't been elite exactly because he's not top 10 in any major quarterback category other than completion percentage. But I highly doubt he gives a crap. I'm sure he'll tell you that the only thing he cares about is wins. And if what he's doing is helping the team win, which it clearly is, then that's all he's going to care about. But guys, let me tell you, the real star of Jacksonville's offense is running back Travis Etienne. So he's sixth in the NFL in rushing yards. He's tied for third in rushing touchdowns, and he's got no fumbles. So he's been taking care of the ball very well. But you know what makes Travis Etienne very dangerous? He is extremely hard to take down. So he's fourth in rushing yards after contact, and he leads the NFL in broken tackles with 17 of them. And Matthew, I think I might have mentioned this in an earlier version of our show, if I remember correctly. But I firmly believe that the most impressive running back stats, not necessarily rushing yards or rushing yards, per carry or rushing touchdowns. I believe the most impressive running back stats are the ones that you make after contact. So yards after contact, broken tackles. Because to me, when I'm looking at the box score stat of rushing yards, not to take credit away from the running back, but also you have to keep in mind that what's helping him a lot, is an opening hole that the offensive line is creating for him. Whereas if you're rushing after contact and you're breaking tackles and all that, then you are purely doing that based off of skill, based off of how good you are. So that's how I feel about that. And also Jacksonville has a top 10 defense. So they're really becoming a very balanced team. And I think Jags fans, after suffering years of torture, I know they're happy right now. I know they're thrilled. But let's talk about the team that's trending down, the San Francisco 49ers, guys. So they're 5-3, but after, starting the season 5-0, with wins in rather dominating fashion, they have now lost 3 straight. And as you mentioned, Matthew, the last game, they got soundly beat 31-17 by the Cincinnati Bengals. And why have the 49ers been struggling so much lately? Well, you can point back to their quarterback, Brock Purdy, who in the last 3 games during their skid, he's thrown for 3 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Okay. And you can only go as far as your quarterback will take you. Now, that being said, you hear that, Jacksonville's got all the momentum right now. San Francisco's trending down. So you might think that, well, Jacksonville's going to win this game, obviously. But I actually think it's the opposite, because I believe the Niners are the more desperate team. I think they're desperate to break out of this funk. And riding this high of their 5-game win streak, I think that they're going to unintentionally rest on their laurels. And I think that the 49ers are going to be in desperation mode, because let me tell you, if they drop a 4th straight game, I'm not saying it's going to be the end of the world for them, but there's going to be a lot of talk among that team. So, but did you guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, one thing I wanted to point out is with San Francisco, they have been dealing with the injury bug a little bit, and
Fair.
that is definitely affecting Brock Purdy. When you take Trent Williams, who's one of the best left tackles in the game, and he's been out for the past 3 weeks, what coincides with that? A 3-game losing streak. So Brock Purdy's really not getting the time that he's accustomed to being in the pocket, like he was with Trent Williams out there. And also Deebo Samuel's been kind of gimped up a little bit, over that same time frame. So your best tackle, one of the best tackles in the league, and one of the best Swiss Army knives in the league, in Deebo Samuel, those both being out, those are 2 really key components to the versatility that the San Francisco offense has had up to this point. But from what I've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, but both of those guys are expected to be back for this game. So this should be a really good test for both of these teams. San Francisco getting back to full strength, and Jacksonville, continuing on the roll that they're on.
Yeah, and Trent Williams, he's not just one of the best offensive tackles in the game today. He's one of the best offensive tackles in NFL history, and he is a lock for first ballot Hall of Fame. Not even a question.
Yeah, he's a staple piece for that 49ers offense. So to get him back is really going to set the rhythm and the tone that the Niners desperately need. I know you're saying, wow, one player, it's crazy what just one player can do to a team, but that just shows you how good he is, just like David said, as being one of the best in NFL history. So getting him back as well as Deebo Samuel is going to be very important for this Niners team. We all agree that Christian McCaffrey is amazing, but there's only so much you can utilize him for. We saw it happen in the NFC Championship game when the Niners practically lost their whole quarterback roster and had to bring in the replacements. So Christian McCaffrey is great, yes, but you can only use him to a certain level of degree. So getting their whole team back is going to be very important for them. But as we kind of talked about earlier, I mean, me and Ed practically talked about 3 of the 4 teams in this division. There has been a lot of talking about the best division in the NFL and it being the AFC North. And the AFC North consists of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Baltimore Ravens, Cincinnati Bengals, and Cleveland Browns. And yeah, you hear the Browns in there and you're like, well, normally you would not talk about that, but this division is very good. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Steelers fan, but if you look at it statistically this year, they are the only division in the NFL where all 4 teams have a winning record. And yes, that same Cleveland Browns team has a winning record. As I said earlier, 3 teams are tied for second with the Steelers, Browns, and Bengals. But each team complements each other in a certain way that it's hard to really describe, but not a whole lot of other divisions can do that. As Ed touched on earlier, and I thought he had a perfect analogy by talking about a mirror image team between the Browns and the Ravens. He hit that spot on. You look at the 2 quarterbacks on those teams with Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson, 2 MVP caliber quarterbacks when they are at their best. And very similar, they both lost their starting running backs to season-ending injuries this year, with J.K. Dobbins tearing his Achilles, and we all saw the very unfortunate injury with Nick Chubb against the Steelers. But they're still pumping. They're still winning games even without them, but they're still relying on their run game. But that also helps when you have 2 running quarterbacks like they have. But their defenses, just like Ed said, number 1 and number 2, especially with the defensive backs, they are phenomenal. But those are just 2 teams. We also have the Bengals and the Steelers, TJ Watt, Joe Burrow, who is going to win an MVP here. Just give it some time. He is that good of a quarterback who has brought his team to a Super Bowl, an AFC championship game again after that. You are looking at the best division in football right now, especially when you look at both sides of the ball. Like I said, TJ Watt, Myles Garrett. Those 2 names are probably going to be in the top 3 when it comes to defensive players of the year at the end of the season. Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, as same thing. 2 names that are probably going to be in the top 3 or top 5 when it comes to the MVP at the end of the year. A healthy Lamar Jackson is a scary Ravens team. So from top to bottom in this division, especially because the Browns have dealt with injuries even with Deshaun Watson too. But guess what? They still won their games without him. So I expect this to continue to happen. Of course, they will eventually keep playing each other this year, and that is going to result in losses. But I do think at the end of the day, when it comes to playoffs, 3 out of the 4 teams in this division will make it. So that's how I feel, and I'd like to hear if you guys feel the same.
Well, I also, want to point out that I think you're exactly right, Matthew. But just to kind of mess with you a little bit here, the Steelers might be the worst 5-3 team that I have ever seen in my entire life. But hey, you know what? at the end of the day, you guys are 5-3, and I'm sure you would rather be the worst 5-3 team of all time than the best 3-5 team of all time. So
Yeah, I've said it before on here, a win is a win, but I don't say that out of because our team sucks, but our team we aren't good. We probably are the worst 5-3 team, and I say that as an honest, true Steelers fan. Kenny Pickett, I don't really necessarily know what's going on with him, but I could talk for a whole episode when it comes to that, especially when it's my team. But I will say, coming into the year, I had got very frustrated when I saw that famous four-letter network talking about who's the worst team in each division, and they mentioned the Steelers. This was before the year started, and I was upset about that. I'm like, you're gonna say the Browns aren't? They weren't necessarily tested yet. They still needed to kind of go through a full year with Deshaun Watson because he was suspended at the beginning of last year. But I'd have to say that I agree. Steelers just aren't looking that good, but the season is not over yet. So I'd like to see if we can make those adjustments.
And one thing that I wanted to point out is when you take a look at the AFC as a whole versus the NFC as a whole, the AFC is so much further along than what the NFC is, just in power rankings and the builds of the teams. So being the best division in football right now, at being the AFC division, is not a surprise. The fact that their entire division is probably all better than 75% of the NFC teams that are out there. So that makes that road to the playoffs that much harder. And it's going to mean every single game that they go through mean that much more as you get closer to the end of this season and jockeying for a playoff berth.
yeah, and to add to your point, Ed, two of the absolute worst teams in the league are both in the NFC. So
Yeah, it's this started like 2 years ago too, when you saw Russell Wilson get traded to the Broncos. Little did we know how horrible he would be there and that team. But the AFC was talked about as being such a powerhouse with all this talent. And it's true. And that's even with saying Russell Wilson sucks in the AFC. But the AFC has still continued to produce. And you're seeing, even though we haven't been able to see him yet, Aaron Rodgers going to the AFC as well from the NFC. Sorry, Ed. I know Packers are your team, and I'm pretty sure that's a Rodgers jersey in the back. But that's just how it is a lot of people are coming over to the AFC, but on top of that, the AFC is bettering themselves even within, coming from the draft and so on. But when you have Patrick Mahomes there, running the AFC for all these years, who then took over from Tom Brady running the AFC all these years, it just shows you the AFC and the levels that they're at above the NFC. Not that I'm saying that it's so much more, because the Eagles could easily win the Super Bowl just like they almost did last year. But the AFC, they are neck and neck. They're battling each other every single week, and I love to see it because I'm just a football fan. But like I said earlier in the show, the weekends are packed. We got always something going on, but it's just more than college football and NFL. Like I said, it is also the start of college basketball, and this is the first weekend that we're going to see that. And I know David's got a couple games on his that he's keeping an eye on that he'd love to preview. So, David, let the fans know what they should be looking at for this weekend on college basketball.
yeah, so tomorrow we actually have three top 10 teams playing. We got the number 6 team, the number 6 team playing, the number 7 team playing, the number 8 team playing. So how funny is that to be in order? But what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to give any game previews because all these teams are playing garbage teams. No offense to fans of those particular teams, but I'm not going to waste my time doing game preview. So instead, I'm just going to give you a quick preview of the ranked teams, how they did last year, what to expect this year, and so on and so forth. So let's take a look at UConn, right? They're the number 6 team in the country. Okay. And I will mention who they're playing at least, but that's as far as game previews interviews go. So they are playing Stonehill, and UConn, as we all know, they are the defending champs. But guys, there's a reason why UConn is not only not ranked number 1, but also out of the top 5. They are number 6, but there's a reason why they're out of the top 5. And here we go. So let's take a look at who they've lost. They lost Adama Sanogo, who led the team last year in points and rebounds. They lost Andre Jackson Jr., who led the team in assists. And they also lost Jordan Hawkins, who was the team's second leading scorer, okay? That's a lot of production to lose from a championship winning team. Now, that being said, UConn still has an overall very strong squad because Tristan Newton came back and he was the team's third leading scorer last year. And also UConn has a very strong recruiting class. They had a very strong recruiting class coming in, top 5 per 24/7 Sports, highlighted by Stefan Castle, who was the overall number 2 shooting guard recruit. Okay, so they still have a very talented roster, but they also lost quite a few key pieces, which is why they're not ranked number 1, despite being the defending national champions. Moving on, we've got number 7 Houston against Texas A&M Corpus Christi. So Houston last year finished 33-4, and they lost in the Sweet 16 to Final Four participant Miami. All right, key losses for Houston. They actually lost 2 of their leading scorers last year in Marcus Sasser and Jarris Walker. I believe that's how you pronounce his name, Jarris. My apologies if I pronounced that wrong. But they do return Juwan Roberts, who led the team last year in rebounds and blocks, and also Jamal Sheed, who led the team in assists and steals. And then finally, we got number 8 Creighton against North Dakota State. Now, unlike UConn and Houston, who had very good regular seasons, Creighton kind of had an up and down regular season, but once they hit the tournament, they were on cruise control up to the Elite 8, and they lost only by 1 point to San Diego State, who, of course, would eventually go on to the title game and lose to UConn. So key losses for the Blue Jays are Ryan Nembhard, who led the team in assists, and also Arthur Kaluma, who was top 5 in team scoring and rebounding. But you know who Creighton is returning? Ryan Kalkbrenner, who led the team in points, rebounds, and blocks. He is the defending 2-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year. So he is a beast both on offense and defense. By the way, it bothers me so much that Creighton is in the Big East when Nebraska isn't even in the East, but I digress. But anyway, but yeah, I think all these teams should be able to handle their opponents very easily. I know I talk about how college basketball is unpredictable, so of course, yada, 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 anything could happen, but I just don't see it happening. But Ed, what are your thoughts?
Well, for the season getting started, we've already seen some pretty decent matchups, and we're going to see even more as we get into more and more of these early season tournaments. So really, we're going to start to see some separation between the haves and the have-nots. When dealing with a non-conference schedule in college basketball, you're going to see a lot of, tune-up games, if you will. But then you'll also see some of these titanic clashes. And, they both serve their purpose. Those titanic clashes, they get them ready for the end of the season. Those tune-up games, they get them ready for getting into conference play, just making sure that the fine details are taken care of. And when it comes to those 3 teams, especially Houston, being here in the Lone Star State, that's one I'm keeping an eye on because they are now as part of the Big 12, which I'm going to keep more of an eye on than any other conference. I'll just be honest with you, because of Texas, because of Kansas, because of Texas Tech, and so forth and so on. These are all teams that really have something to prove to show that they are worthy of those rankings. We've already seen Michigan State go down. We've seen some tough times for Duke as well. So it's just a matter of where do we go from here? We're at the first quarter of the race. and let's see where we go from there. That's really kind of what I'm looking for. But when it is not a game season, it's talking season. You know, with all sports, there's going to be the time of year in which those games are being played and the time of year in which those games are being talked about. Well, here we are at in the end of November, middle of November. I forget which day we're on, but it is award season for the MLB. We had the World Series in just a couple of weeks ago, so it was time to get all those ballots, look at all that game film, see who some of the best players of the year were, and the Gold Glove Awards came out this week. And I'm not going to go through every single one of them that received a Gold Glove. We'd be here half the night. But a couple of points I wanted to bring out with it is there were 3 winners from one team in both leagues. That doesn't happen very often. That is, teams that are really put an emphasis on making sure that the spectacular plays are routine and the routine plays are even more routine. So those are the teams that make it toward the end. In the American League, it was the Rangers. Hey, what do you know? Defense wins championships. So here we go. Their catcher Jonah Heim, their first baseman Nathaniel Lowe, and as well as the right fielder Adolis Garcia. So we saw how magnanimous and extra he could be during the playoffs, with his offense. You throw that on the top of the fact that he has a rocket for a right arm, then it's going to be all smooth sailing for defense for the Rangers. Now in the National League, you had the Cubs with 3, and that is Nico Horner, Dansby Swanson, as well as Ian Happ. Growing up, I was so used to seeing the middle infield mean so much more than the other areas of the field as far as having a solid defense. That second base to shortstop to second base transfer, such a huge part of the game when I was growing up. But now, as the game has changed, I'm seeing something a little bit different. I'm seeing the catcher and first baseman. That is your backstop for the rest of the team and defense. So we have the American League, same team. We also had it in the National League be from the same team. That was Gabriel Moreno and Christian Walker from the Diamondbacks. They, keep everything in front of them. They really did well as far as, once again, making those spectacular plays routine so the rest of the team can relax and just do their job because they know that they're going to get those balls that are thrown to them without any problem whatsoever. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention is there were 2 rookies that won Gold Gloves this year. Once again, one from each league. Brenton Doyle, the center fielder from the Rockies, just a burner out in the outfield and reads the ball very well off the bat. And when you're talking about being in Colorado, he's got to do a lot of running back toward the fence because those things, the balls out there go flying. So, congratulations to him, as well as Anthony Volpe, the shortstop from the Yankees. Now, what I'm seeing from the Yankees with him in the lineup is the ability to start growing together and create one of those dynasties like we saw in the late 90s when the captain came in, when you had Bernie Williams, when you had Scott Brocious, when you had just all those guys. I totally forgot those. But when you have a team that you can build around and build around defense first and still have the offense that Aaron Judge can provide you, you're going to be looking good for the next few years. As much as I hate it because I'm not a Yankees fan, go Astros. But, I'm looking forward to seeing them do big things this year. Matthew, what are you thinking?
Yeah, growing up, it was the Omar Vizquels, the Jim Edmonds, the Vladimir Guerreros. It was always, to me, that's what I loved, was watching defense. And everyone always thought baseball was so boring, but to me, I tuned in to watch the defense. Watching Scott Rowland and at third. I just, to me, I still love it till this day. 6-4-3 = 2, and you're not going to convince me otherwise. But it's just, the defense is a very fine art, and it's something that I've always been connected to when I watch baseball. So watching the Gold Gloves, you always have your opinions on who you really feel like is the best defender, but stats will prove otherwise. But I love watching baseball for its defense, and it's something that people should always keep their eyes on. But that's about all the time we have today, folks. So keep an eye, because we have more awards coming out with the MVP, Cy Young, Manager of the Year. So keep an eye out on that, and college football this weekend. We are going to see things take place. But thank you for tuning in. Hit that like and subscribe. We are rounding third, and we are headed for home.